Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, Review Anything and Everything. And today we're getting into the Kamino training facility. This is Lego set 40765. This is actually a gift with purchase, so there won't be a link in the description to purchase this, but I'm doing a review of it anyway in an unboxing. So obviously this is from the Star Wars Episode 2 movie where they first introduced the clones. You see Jango Fett there. Obi-Wan is coming to investigate the scene, and they show all the clones there for the first time. They're wearing these red jumpsuits, and you see them all there. Some of them eating lunch. You just see them all like at their, just in the background doing their thing. And so this is kind of like their little training facility setup. It's very interesting, and I know there have been a lot of people who have done videos in the past of mocks of the outside of the Kamino environment and whatnot. What's interesting is this is coming on the heels of the Jango Fett ship, the Jango Fett Starship, or Starfighter, that just came out, which is actually the Slave One. They just kind of renamed it because Disney wants to rename things, but I'm just gonna call it Slave One. So the Jango Fett Slave One, this is really kind of going hand in hand with that. So as a gift of purchase, even though you don't need to have purchased that, the theme of it goes hand in hand with that for that scene. But what's interesting also is that there is a Lego set, Obi-Wan's Starfighter, and it's a Delta 7 ship. His name of ship is not going to call it that on the thing, but it's a Delta 7 ship, because for me, it's always, ever since in Episode 2, it was one of my favorite, if not my favorite, like fighter ship. The design of it is very simple, and so I was a fan of that set. That set goes for $23. I'm gonna put a link in the description for that. That comes with Obi-Wan. It comes with his droid, like an R2-D2 type of droid, and it comes with one of the Kamino species. I forget what they're called, but the long neck ones from Episode 2. Now, that's the only set that's currently, and that I ever knew of, that you can get that race of beings that, created the clones. Now, unfortunately, the fact that you can't buy a bunch of these sets, I'm sorry that I'm going to ramble a little bit. Unfortunately, the fact that you can't buy a bunch of these sets is a negative. But you can always have this as the starter point, and then maybe if you did have some other clone troopers and regular clone trooper gear, you could build up a facility and you kind of mix it a little bit and saying, okay, this is what they look like when they're not in their uniforms, but they do get their uniforms at this facility if you wanted to mock that. The point I was gonna get at was that this is a time frame right now where you have a chance to have this, you have a chance to have the Jango Fett Slave One, and you have a chance to still get, while it's in production, the Obi-Wan ship, being able to mimic that entire scene with everything you need to kind of mimic that, obviously save from the fact that you would have to make your own mock build, whether it's simple or advanced, of the Kamino planet area or facilities. But another thing I would always say too is when it came to Obi-Wan Starfighter, most of that stuff can be reused. So if you want to buy more of that, you could reuse that for other Jedis. All you have to do is just, obviously, the multiple copies you might have of Obi-Wan, you might chuck those, but some of those parts are still usable too. Maybe you change the head and then put someone else's head on it if you have another Jedi, because he's got nice robes. He's even got a hood over his head, so like how the Jedis would have. So if you wanted to just do that, the rest of that setup could be the Starfighter itself could be a setup for any other Jedi you just want to give, and just give them that same kind of ship, because it's basically a generic Jedi ship for Jedis to fly. It's not specifically like he's the only one who owns one. But in addition to that, you would get more of the Kamino, how do you say it, as a race, Kaminoans, if I'm saying that wrong, but you would be able to get more of them, as many as obviously you buy that set. So I don't think that's a bad purchase or a reason to buy multiple of them, because you could still use everything else that comes in that set in other ways. So sorry for the rambling. We're gonna take a look at the box first, and I'm gonna open it up. 190 pieces that it comes with, and here you could see I'm not really too sure if this is like some kind of little hover floating thing. You got the little gun rack here and the targeting post, which I guess shoots at them and they got to shoot at it. So supposedly these things were in the scene of the movie, but since it's such a short scene, I never paid attention to realize that. So maybe you have. We're gonna cut this open really quick. Here it shows the clone cadet. And I really don't have a lot of clone figures, but I rarely take their helmets off once they have them on. I don't know if this is your standard clone face, so anyone in the comments can kind of add to that. Like I said, it's a really big shame though that this is not a set that you can buy multiple of. Now granted, it's not the most, that scene didn't really revolve around seeing the clones, so I get it. And once clones get into their clone armor, you'll never see them like that again. But at the same time, there is that vibe of, you know, I'm sure people want to buy more of these. So here you got bag 1 and bag 2. It's a pretty quick and simple build. And here goes the booklet, instruction booklet. So hopefully it's gonna be an easy build. And we're gonna jump into that and we'll be back when it's fully built and jump into our review. All right, everybody, we're back with the finished build. And it didn't take too long, even though I was mildly distracted while watching Lego Star Wars videos while I was putting this together. But I did go back to take a look at the scene in episode 2 because I really wanted to know what was the purpose of this and what was the function of it. The way it seemed in the short clip that it was in seemed to be that it was really just monitoring the widespread of you know, the clones just in their habits. The screen was pulled too far back to see if it was a training situation that they were overlooking or not, or it was just kind of like just them sitting down. It was hard to see, but you just see these things floating above, and it looks like that this thing was picking something up on like the little fork end, so it's kind of flying around like this, and this is kind of coming down, it's doing something, and then it's moving. So I don't know if it's doing work in the process of creating the clones, or if it's just there to monitor. I'm not sure. But one thing I did get the vibe of, and it's somewhat, I think, illustrated on the box, but this just could just be how they're doing the box, is I think that if someone is going to be riding those things, it's going to be one of the Kaminoans, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, once again. I think they're going to be the ones who ride in it. So this really would go hand in hand with that Obi-Wan set, as I mentioned earlier, for the only Kaminoan figure. I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing that for a while. Kaminoan figure that you can actually get, because you can't get them really anywhere other than that set. Thank God, I would say that set is relatively, not even relative, it's actually a great price on Amazon for $23, and I think that's a great price for what you get. Unfortunately, using a set like that to, I don't want to call it army build, but staff build is a little bit too expensive. But being that they didn't have a lot of them in the scene anyway, if you wanted to go the route of having like maybe a total of 3 or 4 of them, then in that regard, it's not so bad. And once again, you would be able to just use those Jedi Starfighters for other Jedi that you have that don't have ships. But here in the scene, you could see that you have the 3 guys doing their training, 3 clones doing their training, and this is just flying around for the most part monitoring. So either you could think of it as an autopilot, or if you're gonna put someone in it, I think it would not be a clone. Anyway, I set down this base to kind of set the mood, because when you look at that scene, there's a lot of gray everywhere. Now, before I get into the details of that, we'll jump into the minifigures. And they're pretty much all the exact same. There is no dual face on the reverse side. The only differentiating factors is that they all have a different pistol in hand. But other than that, oops, you've got arm printing. They're pretty much basic jumpsuit, but they do have the dual molded legs, which is actually really nice that you're getting that additional quality in the figure. So I'm not going to go over each other one because they're just different guns. This was the gun rack. Now, anyone who watches my channel knows that if there are extra pieces, I like just throwing them into the build rather than like putting them someplace else. I like if I can put them into the build. So this piece here and those two blue studs were, one is flat, like tile like, and the other one is a basic stud, was extra. So I just put them on there to decorate it. Maybe this could be a lever that you press to maybe unlock the guns, allowing you to actually remove them. And these could be just lights that, you know, light up in the background area. But nonetheless, I just threw that in there. There's pretty much a gun rack. I wouldn't even call it like a barricade that you could stand behind. It's really just I would call it a training gun rack where you would come and pick up your guns for the purpose of doing the training event. That's pretty much it. Nice little build. This right here is a little gun turret that has 4 little blasters on each side, and it rotates, a little gun post. You could imagine maybe that they're trying to shoot at it while not getting tagged. Maybe they got to run from a starting position. So maybe they're standing behind this and he's got to reach that. Obviously there's no other obstacles in the way, so you're really probably just going to get hit. But nonetheless, if you want to jazz up the scene with a couple of the bricks, it would be like you got to run to it to get to the post and then maybe tag it before you get yourself caught or something to that effect. And then jumping into the little build here, like I said, it's really just it's not something you're going to have for army building. This whole scene in itself is really kind of based around just what it is, the cloning facility. It's training facility, cloning facility, all that kind of stuff. So it's basically like just a assistant robot, if you want to say, if you're thinking of it as an autopilot thing, think of it similar to the way in the Matrix where you had those robots that would come and grab the humans and from their little like incubator things and move them around. It's essentially kind of like that, is at least how I view it, is doing assisted tasks. This thing in the image looked like it was from a distance picking something up and then moving. So I'm not really sure, but it also acts as a stand for you to do that. And then if it's flying, you could do it like this. Let me change the angle on that a little bit because so you guys can see it a little bit better. And it would be like that, just kind of flying around, monitoring things. You got the lights. Now these rotate, but not at the same time. So you have to rotate them yourself, but they do have that ratcheting effect. So that way they'll lock into place. And then there's no controls in this, but you can see the opening here. So you can throw a figure in there if you want, or just like I said, assume that it's automated. And it's a nice build for what you see if you go back and watch the movie and you see it in it. But I would say that it's a lot going into such a thing that might seem pointless, but technically by that same means, you would say this whole scene is pointless in that it's a scene, but it's not something like you would build an army of to do anything. It's just a moment in time. That's all it really is. So if you're looking for that, then this goes hand in hand with obviously the scene that you want to build up if you want to build that up. And it's just very interesting because between that moment, between the Jango Slave 1, between Obi-Wan Starship, which you can now buy all of these sets and get this while it still lasts, gift of purchase. It really all is to just capture that moment in time. And it's funny because I feel that moment in time has so much weight to it in comparison and in regards to like the way you would view, say, Boba Fett when he was first made his appearance in the original trilogy. You never saw what he looked like underneath the mask. You just seen his ship for a short amount of time. He appeared in the second movie, and then he appeared in the third movie, episode 5 and episode 6. But at the same time, it was like the impact of how everyone viewed him and so excited for him was so huge. And I feel like Django was the same way. Granted, he only had one movie, but I would say his appearance time probably totaled as much as Boba's did in the 2 movies. And it's just, so my point that I'm making is that this little moment in time for fans have so much weight, because I believe even though Boba Fett, became like, if, anyone remember during that time, became like the super idolized character. He was like everyone's favorite, but no one knew of him. So Django, I think, became even more of a favorite to a lot of people because it was like, we got to see what he looks like underneath the mask. We realized that he is Boba, just the cloned, the original copy version. All the other clone troopers are made from him. So it gave so much weight. So even though it's just a moment in time, it's a very important moment in time. And I can see why a lot of people want to capture that moment. With that being said, I'm not going to go on too much longer with it. I am going to put the link in the description for, like I said before, Obi-Wan's Starfighter. Even though this right here is just give a purchase, you're not really going to be able to get this other than buying it on the third market after the fact. But just wanted to do a review anyway, because that's what we do on this channel. And as always, you guys like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.